Welcome everybody to another session of the Sales Kickoff Summit 2016. Hope you guys have been enjoying the other sessions that you've been watching today. And I'm really excited, by the way, Gabe Biam is our social selling director here at HireView. But I don't want to introduce myself because I'm so excited that Leslie Young with Box is here. So it's an honor that she's taking 20 minutes of her day, and as a busy executive that she is. So I'm just gonna, Leslie, let you take the mic and just introduce yourself, tell us who you are, and take it from there.
Hi, thanks, Gabe. I'm Leslie Young. I am SVP of Corporate Sales at Box, and I also handle their sales operations business and productivity. And you might ask why those things are all put together. It's part of our go-to-market strategy, and one of the things that I do in the corporate sales segment is drive velocity sales, which requires a lot of repeatable processes, and that's a little bit of why I inherited the sales operations part of the business, because it's very process oriented, and the productivity side of the business, because without knowledge it's very hard to sell. And one of the things we've been trying to do around the productivity side of our business is automate the way that we certify people so that they can do it in much like this environment and do it online, to make the whole thing much more cost effective. So I don't know if that makes a lot of sense about who I am and what I do, but I was trying to put the parts and pieces together. I think for the context of this conversation, we're going to be talking today about scaling SMB teams. And I've been doing that for the better part of the last 10 years. I've been at, I think it's three companies that were pre-IPO to the scale of post-IPO, going public, and one company that was bought by Oracle. So I've done it a couple of times. I've learned a lot. I have the scars to prove it, and hopefully I can share some of that with you today.
Oh no, we're excited. No, it sounds like you've done it, and you've been in the trenches and you've done it multiple times. So let's just get to the topic.
Sure.
So like you mentioned, let's talk about how to build a repeatable sales process in the SMB and mid-market. So let's deep dive a little bit into what's been your experience in building a repeatable sales process. Go for it.
Yeah, I think probably the first thing is you have to have the product that enables a repeatable sales process. You can't sell a sophisticated enterprise product in a repeatable way. It's just far too complex. So one of the things that obviously you have to have is the product that supports a velocity sales model. And the situation or storyline that is repeatable and can be applied across multiple companies. As I said in a couple of times of being asked about this, is the ideas of actually putting it together are really easy. It's the implementation that's hard. And then finally, it's really the empowerment of the people who are involved in the process that's crucial. It's what makes it work. So, just to talk a little bit about like how it works. In the places that I've joined where we've done this, it really has relied a lot on first understanding exactly what it is that works. In other words, those first 3 or 4 salespeople who come into an organization are critical to your success. And understanding and documenting what they're doing that works in the wins that they've had, and testing that against other situations is a big part of making this work. The other part of it is you have to be willing to be agile about it, because the first couple of wins may not repeat themselves in the next situations where you're trying to drive a sales cycle, and you might find out that different segments or verticals react differently to the way you engage with the customer. So it's a little bit about that too. And then finally, it's about making sure that you're socializing what you're doing with other business partners, and the other business partners would be those folks who are in finance, or those folks who are in customer success, anyone who's along the sales journey. Marketing obviously is really critical to doing a repeatable process or creating velocity. A huge part of that comes from marketing and the kinds of content and the way in which they're delivering content online. As we all know, about 67% of the sales process happens before we ever engage with a customer. So having a website that drives relevant content that reflects the storylines that your AEs are telling is critically important. The other thing that's always been part of my philosophy in doing this is when you've built the process and when you've got the repeatable pieces that you know work through that process, and you start to come up with a number of playbooks. You come up with playbooks for those places where you can rinse and repeat, and those would be things like you sold to a media and entertainment company. The company size is in the 300 to 500 size. There was a number of things that worked with that media and entertainment company. And in our case, it would be things like they have to share content with their ecosystem. How do they share that content? Let's make sure everybody knows those plays. And then getting those plays into the hands of everyone and making sure that they understand how to talk to those plays. And then moving that to kind of how do you 10x that? Because if you have 5 people, oftentimes, or my experience has been in the places that I've worked, that you actually have to drive scale fast, which means you're not just hiring a couple of people, you're hiring like 10 to 15 people. And it's super important that you actually have a way of onboarding those folks and you have the tools. So we have what's called Box Camp. It was one of the things that I developed when I first got here and was asked to hire, I think, something like 50 people over the course of a year. Can't do it by, side-by-side selling or learning. You really have to put together a program. You need to put everybody through the program. It's a concentrated effort. And then you need to follow that up with knowledge and tools and certifications. So I think those are some of the things that I would say are really important to scaling.
So let's talk about that. You said Box Camp, the onboarding.
Yes.
Tell us more about that. That sounds, very,
Sure.
hardcore, intriguing. Tell us, how did you come up with that program and how can other sales leaders do that themselves?
Well, it's a good story. When I first started at Box, my boss, Jim Herbold, at the time told me not to focus on it because he said I had too many other things to focus on. And I told him I was going to do it anyway. So in its first incarnation, it was really helping those folks who are coming into the organization who may be remote, understand and have the opportunity to interact with across our organization with all of the people that they would need to successfully execute a sales cycle. Sometimes we forget that if you're not sitting in the building with people, that it's really hard to actually create a relationship. So first and foremost, Box Camp was designed to develop the relationships that people would need to be successful in sales. The second one was to help them get context for what they would be doing. And context is bringing organizations like the CSMs in to talk about what the customer stories are. Sales reps in my experience, tend to relate to stories and the success stories and the business impacts and the business outcomes more than what the technology does. Technology is just an enabler of a business process. And so we want to make sure that they are steeped in the story. So we spent a lot of time on doing that. And then a big part of what we do is spent on what are the selling motions and how do you execute those selling motions and how do you get equipped to do that. So a lot of focus on our corporate pitch and certifying people on the corporate pitch. Now, that's not all done inside that Box Camp. That Box Camp is really an opportunity to get face-to-face with the rest of our organization. So we have online a couple of different programs, one which is called Accelerate, which is a series of 12 learnings, and then a program called Masters, which is, as you'd expect, Masters. After you've mastered the basic program, you move into the Masters one, which is some of the more sophisticated negotiation tactics. And those are all done online through a product called LearnCore that basically gives the context for what we're going to talk about. Why is this important? How does it play with the other products? And then gives the exercise or the pitch of what happens. And the exercise is then either in the case of how you go about account pursuit, give me an account that you're going to use and we'll walk through an account pursuit for you. So you actually end up with the output of a plan that you'll go execute against. So it's both learning, it's testing. So certification happens on the corporate pitch, and it's also you get an output that you can actually learn to sell. And that's so Box Camp face to face, and then Accelerate, the basics that you're going to need, and Masters sort of refining what you need, what you know.
Awesome. And you guys till this day still do that, right? Have implemented that, and you guys the whole company has adopted that.
The whole company has adopted it. We are now measuring all of our AEs on the Box corporate pitch certification, and that's something that Aaron stays on top of. And he also is one of the people who reviews the certification. So we give out awards for those folks who score the highest, and oftentimes they'll present in front of our executive team.
Right. And so at Box, you guys currently have a specialized model of inside sales, setter, closer model, or a general, or What does that look like?
We have two models. We have inside sales that are part of our enterprise team, and they're part of a pod of 3 people. They do have their own discrete quotas, and then they're part of a larger quota. And then we have our commercial team, which is responsible for their revenue from end to end.
Okay.
And that runs, that's your classic commercial companies of below 500 employees. And then we have a mid-market group that's more of a hybrid. That probably looks a little bit more like an enterprise selling organization. So we have a combination of both those. The commercial organization is separate and discrete from the enterprise organization as far as revenue goals and quotas.
Awesome. So let's move on to the KPIs, measurements, and goals that you recommend for sales leaders or that you've seen are crucial and vital in a sales organization to create a repeatable, sustainable process.
Yeah, so there's a number of them. Obviously, pipeline is probably the number one piece that you look at, and how you build that pipeline. Our pipeline is built across a number of organizations. What I'll focus on are the ones that come out of sales. We obviously have a goal or a KPI that marketing delivers to us and the channel team delivers. So those are things that we don't actually have control over. Those ones that we do have control over are what we do from an inbound perspective, or from an inbound qualification perspective and outbound outreach perspective. So going out into those target accounts, and then what is sourced from the AE themselves. So we have KPIs for each one of those. And the way we measure those are a couple of things. Obviously, how many opportunities are generated, how many opportunities are generated per week and per month and per quarter. So what's the pipeline build look like? And then also critical to that is what are the ACVs of those transactions. So each one of the AEs we track against ACV, pipeline build, week over week, and then conversion. So the third thing is, how well is that AE converting those opportunities that he or she is creating and or is getting from our lead development organization. Our lead development organization is responsible for sourcing about a third of what goes into what we call the sales generated pipeline. And there's a couple of things that we've been doing there to increase their output, which is really trying to decrease the time that they're spending researching and increase the amount of time that they are on calls. So we've moved away from looking at how many calls are made, and we are looking at much more at how many connects we're having, how many connection rate, what's the connection rate, how many discovery calls each one of our AEs or OBRs or SDRs are having, and then how many meetings have been set, and how that drives into pipeline. So if a person has a pipeline, then we're talking about just inside of that pipeline, when they convert, what does the ACV look like, and how much of their business is net new logos versus add-on or expansion. And right now what we're focusing on is expansion of new products as well, because Box has moved into being a multi-product company. So those KPIs tend to evolve over time. When I started this scale piece, it used to be about how many calls are you making. You're making 50 calls a day. Yeah. And it's much more on the conversion rate and actually the connection, i.e. the live conversation. We tend to not focus a lot on email because email can be a bit of, it's not an interaction, so to